I want to take a moment and explain stencil paper and how it works for those who may not be familiar with that. If you have any questions at any point throughout this video, I encourage you to drop a comment down below. I'll do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. With tattoo stencil paper, there are a couple of ways that we could approach making a stencil. I won't get too much into that in this video. I'll save that for another video, so be sure to subscribe and stick around for more videos like this. With stencil paper themselves, we can either freehand our designs or we can go ahead and print them out via thermal printer. It's really going to be subjective to each their own. Whichever workflow fits the artist best is going to be the best way that we should go about creating our stencils. Right here I have a sheet of Spirit stencil paper. Spirit stencil paper is my preferred stencil paper. This is my go-to. I prefer to use this stencil paper out of all the other ones that I have tried. That's also going to be subjective. Every artist is going to feel different about the stencil paper that they use. Right here is going to be a standard sheet of Spirit stencil paper. This is going to be the 8.5 by 11 sheet right here. This is a pretty standard size that you'll see in most stencil papers. It doesn't matter if it's going to be a Spirit stencil brand, S8, or any brand in between. They do range and they do get longer. I believe they do 8.5 by 14. However, just to confirm, this one's 8.5 by 11. This is a standard size that you will typically find when you get some on your end. When you do get the stencil paper in your hand, you're going to notice that there's 4 different sheets. We have the top sheet, we have this sheet right here, we have this sheet, and then we have this last sheet. So there is a total of 4 different sheets here within each stencil paper rather, not just the Spirit brand, but almost every single brand of stencil papers that I've ever used came in this exact format with these layers. Just to confirm, we have the top layer. This is going to be the layer that the design gets printed onto. This is going to be the paper that we put onto the canvas, the design, whether it's fake skin or human skin. The design itself will exist and get printed or drawn onto this side of the paper. So that's how that works. That's this first layer. I do also go more in depth into stencil paper and a lot more variables about tattooing within my new tattooing workbook called the Fundamental Tattoo Handbook. It is now available on my Amazon author page. Head on over to Amazon.com, type in Daniel Yuck or the Fundamental Tattoo Handbook. You'll see it pop right on up. In that handbook, I do go more in depth and explain this so that we can kind of read it and accumulate this information at a pace that's better for you, as I know this video may be either quick or too slow for you. Now, the first page, design gets printed onto this side. It doesn't matter if we are printing or freehanded. Either way, the design is going to get transferred to this side, and then this side is going to go onto the fake skin or human skin like so. This paper right here comes within every single stencil paper, and this is more of a separating sheet is how I look at this. You can kind of see it comes out. This isn't meant to stay in there, so we're going to have to remove this. This separates the carbon from the actual page here to keep this page as clean as possible, so that way when we are ready to actually make the design transferred over to the sheet, we simply remove this second layer and then we place this sheet back down like so. And then now we can continue to either freehand our design, place our printed design over, freehand it in, or load this sheet of stencil paper into a thermal printer and just simply print out the design. So this sheet right here is to be removed. This one's kind of more of an, I guess, like a sort of tan-like color. This is going to vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. You can see that I have a different sheet here of an off-brand stencil paper. When I go to that sheet, you can see that that sheet is more of a transparent white with no off color to it. I'll give you a close-up comparison of these different papers here in a moment. I kind of want to go through the layers. So this is the second layer. Oftentimes we're just going to discard this and we don't need it anymore if we are ready to print. The third layer is going to be this sheet right here. It's actually a clear, transparent film, kind of lined with carbon ink right here. And this is what's going to be transferred over to this area right here, whether we're using pressure and or thermal. This carbon ink is going to get, or I would call it like a dye rather. This carbon ink dye is going to get transferred to this paper. The design is going to get transferred here, and then we put this onto our canvas, once again, whether it's fake and or human skin. But this page right here originally is a clear, transparent film, as you can see. It's not a normal paper like page here. So this whole entire sheet is that of a plastic transparent film. That is going to be the third sheet. Put the second sheet back in here. And then the last sheet is going to be this backing page right here. This is just simply the backing page. When we are using this, some artists kind of discard this and then just use this top film. Other artists keep it on. It's going to be personal preference, to each their own. I also noticed that even some printers require us to move this, while other printers require us to leave it on. So it really is per application. Every artist is going to be different depending on the workflow that they've implemented and prefer. But this backing page isn't something that we would use to draw on or anything. It's more there, I guess, for integral support, I would say. So yeah, we have the backing page, the transparent film with the carbon ink on there. We have the splitter page right here, the dividing page, and then we have the main top page. That right there is the 4 layers of tattoo stencil paper. It really doesn't matter if we are using Spirit stencil paper or any other brands. Most stencil papers will come in this exact format with some minor variances. Here I have 2 different stencil papers. I have on the left Spirit stencil paper, and on the right I have a stencil paper that doesn't have a brand. Off the top we can notice some visual differences. You can kind of see that the no brand stencil paper has a yellow lining, while the Spirit stencil paper really doesn't have that going on there. You can also see that the grain of the paper also looks different. The Spirit stencil paper appears to be of a sort of maybe finer material, and this one appears to be of a more, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is they are different. So one may have more, I guess, paper fibers and another may not. I don't know the specific terms what I'm looking for. However, what I will say is the grain of the paper is definitely different when we take a look at them right here. The one on the right, the no brand, appears to have a sort of shiny appearance, where the Spirit stencil paper appears to have a more dull appearance. From my experience, the duller appearance leads to better results, less bleeding in my stencils, and I'm able to capture more detail. With the shinier stencil paper, it kind of leads to more adversities when I print. I do get a lot of adverse results upon printing. So I do personally prefer for my stencil paper to be a bit more dull as opposed to have a shinier appearance. Another difference that I'm noticing off the top is the separating page here. This one is of a sort of like off color, like a sort of tan. This one right here is just of a white color. And another thing is the dye here, the ink on each paper, the off brand is of a bluish color and the Spirit stencil paper is of a purple color. So that means the designs, when I place them down with the off brand, is going to be blue if that's a color you're looking for. Me personally, I'm not a big fan of blue. I prefer to go with the purple all the way. I have better results using this one right here, the Spirit stencil paper, versus this one right here. However, I'm sure some artists may not care, to each their own. There may be even some artists that prefer to use blue over purple. That's going to be subjective once again. And one of the final differences is the backing page. With the off brand, it's more of a yellow color, and the Spirit stencil paper for this specific batch right here, it's of a tan, maybe off-white color. So those are some differences between the Spirit stencil paper and an off brand. You're going to experience fluctuations like this as well, especially if you're using different types of stencil paper. If you're getting, inconsistent results, it may be either because the stencil paper that you were using is rather, I would say subpar. It's giving you issues. Spirit stencil paper may be something that you want to try out if you haven't, or you may want to take a look at your printer, maybe clean it up, something to that extent, which I will make another video on how we can go about correcting inconsistent prints. When I place this stencil paper down on fake skin, you can see it turns of a bluish hue, where the Spirit stencil paper remains of a purple tone. So when I put these side by side, you can see here that they are in fact of 2 completely different tones. The one on the right is blue, while the one on the left is that of a purple tone. So that's going to be subjective, whichever workflow you were looking for. I prefer, once again, the Spirit stencil paper. It's just a cleaner workflow for me. It's something that I've grown accustomed to. You may prefer the blue, to each their own. Once again, can't really exhaust that enough. This is something that's 110% debatable. On the left, I have Spirit stencil paper prints, and on the right, I have the no-name stencil paper. You can kind of see there are some differences. Off the bat, we can really see that blue dye coming through, and we can see the purple seems to be more pronounced, in my opinion. Not only that, this off-brand paper right here appears to have a sort of shiny appearance to the stencils. I'm not sure if you can kind of see that there, that reflection going on. That tends to cause bleeding when I place these down on fake skin, or even human skin, there tends to be a lot more bleed within this dye right here. Whatever this is, I assume it would be carbon, but just blue. This right here doesn't really work as well and hold the integrity as well as Spirit Stencil paper. You can kind of see with the Spirit Stencil paper, everything is more defined and nothing really has a sort of sheen to it or a shine to it here. And that right there really does make all the difference when we go down to place it onto our canvas. We have to remember when we apply stencil applicant, the canvas that or the site that we are placing down on becomes a bit moist. So if this isn't correct, or if we have too much applicant, we're going to experience adversities such as bleeding and or blurring, which could compromise the overall integrity for the entire tattoo, which makes it a design or a stencil that we essentially cannot tattoo. I have really experienced that more with this stencil paper than I have with Spirit, and I feel we as when we start off tattooing, we should know, the differences. So for example, if you are getting nice print, but for some reason you can't place down your stencils for whatever reason, it's probably because you're either adding too much applicant if you are using Spirit stencil paper, or you're using a stencil paper that's giving you more adversities within your workflow than you would want. Another thing that really stands out is the stencil paper on the right, the no brand stencil paper right here, has a shine to it. You can see just with my camera lined up right here pointing at the table, the light is reflecting off of these stencils, where the stencil paper on the left, which is a Spirit stencil paper, has none of that going on. We really have to pay attention to little things like this, because little things like this really do contribute to our overall workflow. I know that right now it may not make sense, but you have to kind of be there in the motions, in the actual experience to understand what I'm saying. For example, I can't paint you a picture though. Let's take a look at these Misfits designs right here. You're going to see the Spirit stencil paper is kind of consistent all the way throughout, if not very consistent in terms of saturation. It is a clean stencil all the way through, as opposed to and that's going to be the Spirit stencil paper, the Misfits design on the right, which is going to be the no brand stencil paper. You're going to see that it goes from darker down to lighter. That does translate over into our design. For me, if I have saturation in the entire design, I want it to print dark all the way throughout. That's just the way that I prefer my stencils. However, that's another adversity that I do see. You're going to see the same thing right here. Some areas are much lighter than others. So it's just little things like that. Right here you can see on the blurry that these shading or the shadow details are much lighter. So you can see this area right here has a much more defined and pronounced area, and these are much more faded. And that kind of continues all the way throughout, even with the Rancid. You can see the Rancid has a sort of faded look to it, where we have the Spirit stencil paper has optimal saturation. So hopefully this close-up right here can kind of do justice and get my points across on what I'm trying to say. So the stencil paper that you pick really does contribute to the overall workflow that you are going to be experiencing. I would recommend to go with Spirit stencil paper, especially if you have been experiencing any adversities when you were placing down stencils and or printing. So I'm going to place both of the designs down. I'm going to do the Hard Life designer here. This is going to be the Spirit stencil paper. This one's going to be the off-brand stencil paper. I'm going to place them down side by side, and I'm going to kind of record the process here, so that way you kind of get a compare and contrast as to how we can go about experiencing adversities within our workflow. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to apply them. I'm going to try to do them in the same go here as best I can. However, if I don't, I'm going to apply them the exact same way by putting a generous layer of stencil applicant. In this case, I'm using Speed Stick. However, I typically use green card. And then I'm going to kind of rub that in there, remove the excess. I'm going to dab up a little bit so that way I don't experience bleed. And then from here, I feel like that is pretty good. I may have taken off a little bit too much applicant, so I'm going to do it one more time. Not too much, not too little. Gently press down, and I think that's a bit better. So I'm going to start by applying the Spirit stencil paper up top, and then I will do the off-brand stencil paper below, just so that way we can get an idea here. So both of them have been applied. Spirit stencil paper, the no brand stencil paper there. I'm going to place a Scotch Shop wipe down, and then apply my palm to the area and kind of apply pressure to the entire area to get a clean press. So that way I can kind of see the results here. I'm just going to kind of go through each here and then give them a thorough press all the way through. I'm not pressing one harder than the other or anything like that. I'm kind of working each area as I see it. I'm not sure if you can kind of see the differences there. I'm kind of place it this way. Hopefully it's on camera there. So once I got to the point where I feel confident that I got a good stick and a transfer going here, what I'm going to do is remove both of the papers and I'm going to see the results here. So I'm going to kind of start by picking them up over here. That one is going to be the blue stencil paper, and then this one over here off to the side that I'm going to do now is going to be the Spirit stencil paper. And right off the bat, in my opinion, the Spirit stencil paper looks more defined. I mean, I could be biased just because I prefer stencil paper. However, this one for the blue was actually a pretty good press because typically I do experience blurring. I think that I got my ratio spot on with my applicant, so therefore I'm experiencing minimal blurring. However, the differences aren't too dramatic. You can see that this one has a more purple hue, this one has more of a blue hue. That will come out more as it dries. I can actually show you the process of drying real time here, so that way you can see the changes and how they happen. So right here I'm using a heat gun, and I'm going to be applying it over, I'm basically applying the heat to the Spirit stencil here, and you're going to see that it rapidly changes to a darker hue of purple as it dries, and the one below is going to change to a blue. So now the actual tone of the stencil paper is really coming out once we let it, or once we dry it like this. It also speeds up the drying process so you don't have to wait a very long time or risk losing your stencil. So if I pick it up here, you're going to see the differences are quite apparent. On the top we have the Spirit, on the bottom we have the no name stencil. And you can see how the hue of them is dramatically different. This one's going to be, again, that classic purple that we're used to seeing. This one's going to be a blue sort of tone. In terms of integrity, these are both 110% tattooable. I'm not against this one either, or this one. I would tattoo both. My personal preference would just be the purple above. That'll be it for this one. Should you have any questions at all, I encourage you to drop a comment down below. Rest assured, I'll do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. I do appreciate you, your time, and your support. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you have a great day. Are you wanting to develop your tattooing skill sets? Now you can practice and develop anytime, any place with an assortment of tattooing workbooks that I've created. With these assorted tattooing workbooks, we can practice our basic lining all the way to advanced lining. We can practice shading, shading placement, dot work, textures, and more. All we are going to need is a tattoo workbook of mine. We can use a pencil, pen. We can even use a tattoo machine with a ballpoint cartridge to develop our tattooing abilities further. That means that we don't need tattoo ink, we don't need napkins or petroleum jelly to get to practicing. Simply open one of my tattooing workbooks and get going. It really is that easy. You can get your hands on one of my developmental tattooing assorted workbooks by simply clicking the links in my description or in the pinned comment section below, or navigating on over to Amazon.com, typing in Daniel Yuck, and you'll see all of the assorted tattoo workbooks that I've created come up. If you have an Amazon account, be sure to follow my Amazon author page as well, as I would greatly appreciate your support. Should you have any questions at all, drop them in the comment section down below. I will do my best to assist you in the best possible direction. With that being said, let's get right back into this video.